guys, welcome to our first virtual lesson. Today we're going to actually go over how to jump a car, okay? So a lot of requests we've gotten over the last 5 years of how to properly jump a vehicle, and we have a lot of students who've learned this technique and have actually helped their parents out, or when they got 16 and 17 and they started driving, they were able to actually use this. We've got quite a few options with us today, and I'm going to go over a couple of those real quick just to show you, the very basics of how we're going to jump a vehicle. Obviously, we have right in front of us here, we've got a very, very basic set of jumper cables. These are somewhere between 5 and 15, maybe 20 bucks at a hardware store or any place like that. You can get these at Walmart. This is a little bit nicer pair. You can tell because the wire is thicker. Even though it looks black and yellow as opposed to the traditional black and red, it is still the same set of jumper cables. We get asked that question by students a lot. You'll often see these for some reason marketed as European jumper cables. I don't know why, but your black's your negative and your yellow is your positive, okay? And then right here, we have an even nicer set of jumper cables, okay? You can tell these are much thicker wire, and the thickness of the wire, all that's gonna allow us to do is to transfer energy from one battery to another at a much more efficient rate. And then in some cases, if you're trying to jump start a very large vehicle like a truck and it's cold outside, you're gonna need a heavier set of jumper cables so it can transfer enough energy over, okay? Also before us we have a jumper box. You guys have all seen these in the stores or used these. This is quite a large one. That's because it does way more than just jumping a vehicle, okay? This has your traditional jumper cables on the back, okay? It also has some outlets on the front, 12 volt outlets, USB, it's got a light, and then actually on the back of this one has an air compressor. And you charge it by plugging it into a wall outlet right there, okay? Pretty neat. Now they also make these jumper boxes now that, are a lot more compact than this, okay? This is not something that is easy to put in the trunk of every vehicle. For instance, the Volvo over here has a very, very small trunk, so I'm not wanting to keep something like this in my Volvo, okay? But I can, however, put it in something like the Xterra, which might need a bigger jump, and there's a much more likelihood that I might be out there by myself and not have anybody to help me jump a vehicle off of. The positives between using jumper cables and a jumper box are that a jumper box you can be, by yourself as long as it's charged. That is the biggest thing, okay? Check on your jumper box every once in a while, probably once a month, every 2 months, because over time the battery's going to trickle down a little bit, okay? So I'll give an instance, throwing myself under the bus. I have gone to use my jumper box before and had it sitting for months and months and months, and got to the point where I really needed it and it didn't have enough electricity, so I was stuck there for a little while, okay? The nice thing about things like jumper cables are that as long as you have another running vehicle nearby, okay, I can use jumper cables to get my vehicle started in most cases, okay? Now, we do have one more option over here, and this is actually called a trickle charge, okay? They're pretty neat little devices that instead of getting that immediate jump, like in an emergency situation, these are really for slowly filling the battery up, okay? So if you have something that you don't drive every day, like a four-wheeler, a collector vehicle, or a Sea-Doo or something like that you just don't drive but only a handful of times, and it seems like every time you go to start it, it's dead, right? These are really cool because you can plug them into the wall and they use very, very small amount of electricity and they maintain the battery, because having a battery that constantly is draining and having to jump back up, you're not going to get a very long life out of it. At Camp Fletcher, we actually have one of these that is hooked up instead of to an outlet like this. It actually has a solar panel, and we use that for our lawnmower. So that's the really nice benefit of trickle chargers, okay? If it's not an emergency and your battery's dead and you just need to you need to charge it up over a period of a day or two, trickle charger's the way to go because it's a lot healthier for your battery. Alright guys, so we're over here at our first vehicle, the Volvo. and we're gonna actually look over for the battery, okay? So we've popped the hood, and we're looking for the battery. Looks like it's under here, okay? You very well might have your battery covered up by something, especially on a newer vehicle, okay? Most of the time, it's gonna be very easy to get to, okay? So all I'm gonna do for here is just lift this cover, pull it out. Okay, it's got these little tabs in the back. Make sure you don't force it out because you don't want to break this, because you want to be able to put this back over, okay? You're gonna set this to the side, but we're gonna make sure that it doesn't get set somewhere that once I start the vehicle, it doesn't get wrapped up in any belts or anything like that. So I'm gonna set it up here for right now, okay? Because then we know it's good out of the way, okay? Now that we've removed the cover, we can very easily see our battery here, okay? On this vehicle in particular, it is it's a vertically mounted battery inside the vehicle, and it is along the driver's side of the vehicle, okay? That's important to note for later, okay? You're gonna notice some differences on all the other vehicles, okay? Here's our positive side. It's marked by the red little thing right here. And if you didn't have this little thing, if you zoom on in, you can actually see right here that it actually has a small little plus sign right here by the terminal, okay? And then over here, you're gonna be able to find, it's actually covered up right now, but there is a negative spot, okay? When you're using your jumper cables later, we're gonna talk about how to properly hook up your jumper cables, and that's very important, not only for so for your personal safety so you don't get shocked, but also for the vehicle. If we were to improperly hook this battery up, we could fry a lot of our electronics on our vehicle, okay? So that's it for the Volvo. Let's move over to the Camry. So we're over here at the Camry, and as you guys will notice, it is on the same side of the vehicle as the Volvo. We have the driver's side battery, but it is not a vertically mounted battery. What's nice about it is it's actually right here at the front, so it's very easily accessible. We didn't have to remove any covers or anything, but we do have this slight cover over the positive side of the battery, the positive terminal, okay? Easy to get to. All I'm gonna do is very gently pull it, and it'll actually stay clipped, or if yours doesn't, again, just set it to the side. Battery terminals are nice and easy to get to. Again, we have our positive side and our negative side. What I do want you to notice on this one, however, is you'll start to notice a little bit of corrosion, okay? This is a fairly new battery, but it does have some corrosion building up. Now, if you are having to jumpstart your vehicle, this should be one of the first things you check, okay? You should be checking this every once in a while, probably once a month, every 2 months, whenever you wash your car or change the oil or anything like that. Because if this corrosion builds up enough, it can actually cause the connection between your battery terminal. Don't ever do that to your car. It can actually cause a bad connection between your battery cable and your battery terminal, okay? And therefore not enough electricity is getting to the starter, and so your vehicle's not gonna start. I think that's it for the Camry. Let's move on to our last vehicle. We're over here at our last vehicle, guys, and this is the Xterra. It's a Nissan. Notice that the battery position has changed in the vehicle. It's not on the driver's side anymore. We've moved over here to the passenger side of the vehicle. Now, this is an older battery. It's been through quite a lot. This is our adventure vehicle, so it gets quite abused. So one of the things that we haven't quite covered yet is to make sure that our battery is properly mounted, okay? So if you'll notice this bar that comes across the top of the battery here, it's mounted to the battery tray in the bottom, and that's very important that that's hooked up correctly. When you go to replace your battery, make sure you hook these back up. A lot of people that change these batteries on their own at home, they end up not hooking these battery hold downs back correctly. So you can give it a good test by just giving it a good little shake. We actually ran into the problem one time where this was not hooked down properly, and we were driving along this really bumpy, rocky road, and long story short, the vehicle shut off. We popped the hood, and the battery was laying sideways in here, and it disconnected itself from the batteries. Easy problem to fix. Put the battery back, hook it back up, you're good to go. Notice on here you're starting to see some rust, some corrosion, things like that. There are different ways to clean that up. We might show those here in a little bit. What we want to make sure, again, is a good, proper connection. That's going to ensure that we get good electricity to our starter and to run all the electronics inside of the vehicle. And that is it for our Xterra. Now let's move on to actually jumping the vehicles. Alright, so we're going to actually start with our jumper box here, okay? This is something that's been a growing trend for people to own, and they are great to have inside your car. So I figured we'd start with these, because these are probably the easiest way to actually start your vehicle, okay? So first and foremost, before I get my jumper box out, I'm gonna make sure that it has charge. A lot of them have like lights, LEDs, anything like that. This one actually gives me a percentage, and it is 91% charged. So that should be enough to start this vehicle, okay? So what I'm gonna start by doing is pulling off my 2 cables, okay? I've got a red and a black one, and my red one goes to my positive side of the battery, okay? And my black one's gonna go to the negative side, okay? So I'll go ahead and hook this up right here. Hook this one up under here. Now, what's really cool about this one is this actually shows me the current voltage inside of that battery, okay? Now, we are showing good voltage at 12.4. That should be enough to start our battery, okay? A battery should range anywhere between, 12 roughly to, almost 13. While it's running, we should actually see a number in the high 13s, low to mid 14s. And the reason why is because our alternator should be charging the battery while the vehicle is running, okay? So now that I've got this hooked up, for this particular model, I'm gonna turn this to the right, and now we have 12.5 volts, okay? As you guys can tell, that's putting more voltage into the battery, so I should be able to start the vehicle. Make sure, before you start it, that this is in a good, stable spot, that it's not gonna fall from the rumbling of the vehicle or anything like that. So, and it might be helpful to have a second person if you can. It might be good for you to hold this, and then have your second person to start the vehicle. But as far as for jump boxes go, that's all there is to it. Now let's go ahead and move on to using traditional jumper cables. All right, so this is our good set of jumper cables. We're gonna show you guys now how to properly jump this vehicle using this vehicle, okay? So first things first, we aren't gonna do it because it would really mess with the audio, but before we start jumping our vehicles, we wanna make sure that our good vehicle is running. And that's an important reason, because if I go to hook this up to here, the energy is always going to move from an area of high energy to low energy. And if I take all of the energy out of this battery and put it into this battery, it's really going to even out. And so then I might not be able to start either vehicle. So it's real important to start with a running vehicle, okay? Now that we've gone beyond that, let's actually unwind our jumper cables here. It's good every time you use them to store them properly by winding them up, okay? You want to make sure that there's no kinks or anything like that, because that could cause breaks in your wire. So let's go ahead and just unwind these a little bit. And this can be done by yourself, but it's a lot easier to do with 2 people, but we're going to show you how to do it by yourself, okay? So first things first, I'm going to put my jumper cables and make sure that they are long enough, okay? So this is where shorter cables could run into a problem, okay? For example, because this battery is on the passenger side of the vehicle and this one's on the driver's side, okay? If this was in a parking space and it had concrete blocks in front of it, I might have cables, may not be able to reach that. So that's something to consider when buying jumper cables, okay? Don't just consider the price point. Think of, am I gonna actually be able to use these, okay? Because for our example, our shorter cables we showed earlier, they cannot actually reach that. They reach to about here, okay? So we wouldn't be able to use them in this situation, okay? So first thing I like to do this is I like to, on the vehicle that I'm gonna be hooking up second, I like to spread my cables apart. So that way there's no chance of them accidentally touching, okay? You guys can just imagine if I hook these up, okay? And I have these touching over here, what's gonna happen? Sparky, sparky. So we're gonna set these nice and apart from each other. Make sure you're not setting them in like a pool of water or anything like that. Then I'm gonna come over here to my other vehicle. I'm gonna grab my cables. Same thing we did as the jumper box, okay? We're gonna hook my red cables up to my positive. Okay, we wanna get a good tight connection on there as best as we can, okay? So I like to hook it either to the base right here, because that's good grip, or you can hook it right here. Now these are top mounted terminals, okay? Or posts, as some people call them. You might have side mounted terminals, okay? Those, instead of being on the top of the battery, might be on the side. You hook them up the exact same. These cables, what's really nice about these is these have these gripping teeth on the front and on the sides, and then on this side, see how that's smoother? That's for one of those side post terminals, okay? They can be really tricky sometimes because they're very, very small, okay? So now that I've got that, I'm gonna hook this side up. This is our negative side, okay? A lot of manufacturers will tell you not to hook it up directly to the negative side of the battery, okay? You're supposed to actually hook it up to a ground somewhere on the vehicle. On modern vehicles, that can be a little bit tricky if it doesn't have a marked ground, because we have all these painted surfaces now, okay? So if you can find a ground, go ahead and hook it up to the ground. It's gonna usually be an unpainted surface, but if you have to, just use the negative in the battery, it'll be fine. So let's come on over here to the other vehicle, and we're gonna be careful not to step on the wire or anything like that. Not because it's dangerous or anything like that, but because we don't wanna break the wires, okay? So I'm gonna pick up my other cables. Okay, notice we have plenty of room with these, okay? This is a benefit of good long cables. We've already removed the cover, okay? Now I'm gonna hook up my negative. Okay, same thing, good strong connection. And my positive, okay? Now, we're gonna let that sit for anywhere between 30 seconds and a minute, okay? If you notice that when you go to start your vehicle that's dead, and it's for, in this instance, this one, you may not be able to hook it up immediately and then automatically turn on your vehicle, okay? Think of it this way. You are trying to charge this battery using that vehicle, and it has to transfer the energy from that battery through this cable, okay? Now, if you have a really heavy-duty vehicle like a big truck or a diesel or anything like that, it's gonna take more energy to turn that engine over, okay? Especially if I'm using a smaller vehicle, okay? I once helped a guy jump a GMC Suburban using my little Miata, okay? So the battery on that Miata, because it's got a little 4-cylinder engine, it only requires a small battery, okay? The big diesel truck, however, requires a much larger battery, okay? So there might be some instances where you're trying to help jump a vehicle or you're trying to get your vehicle jumped, and just because somebody offers to help, their vehicle may not be able to physically do it. It's worth the trying, but just know that if their vehicle doesn't do it, it doesn't mean that there's necessarily a problem. It might mean you have to wait for a longer period of time to help charge that battery, or have somebody with a bigger vehicle, higher output alternator, be able to come over here and jump it, okay? And let's move on now to trickle charging. All right, guys, last thing, and this is pretty simple. You know where this is going. We're gonna use our trickle charger. Notice how much smaller these are and how much thinner the wire is, okay? That's because we're not transferring a high amount of electricity, okay? This is for a slow charge. You're gonna be wanting to do this over a period of at least overnight, okay? If you have a completely dead battery, this isn't going to be a quick solution, but it is a good solution to keep your battery from going dead. So I've got this hooked up to the house, and what I'm going to do simply is plug this here, okay? Find somewhere on here. You're not going to be able to really mess this up very easily, and you're going to hook this here, okay? That's all there is to it. Now, you might, if you still don't have anything coming on, you might check, a lot of these trickle charges have a fuse right here in the line, okay? This one is very small, it's a 7.5 amp fuse, okay? So if it's not working, check that fuse and see if that's your problem, okay? Now, if you've got a vehicle that you're wanting to keep on trickle charge indefinitely, I've got one, what you can do is actually hook this up, and then as long as you check your clearance, make sure you're not gonna hit anything up here, you can actually just rest the hood down, and you're good to go. Give it a few days, but the nice thing is with trickle charging is it keeps your battery in tip-top shape, and whenever you go to use that vehicle, it's gonna be ready to go. I think that's about covered it for jumping. Now let's talk about batteries themselves. All right, guys, so what I wanted to show you guys is I actually purposely killed the battery on this Camry to show you what a dead battery looks like, okay? As I've hooked up the jumper box, I don't have it turned on yet, but I want you to see that it's showing 10.5, 10.7 volts, okay? This is a 12 volt battery. So that means that there is not currently enough electricity in this battery to start the car. Okay, when I get in, the lights come on a little bit, it dings, but nothing really happens when I go to hit the starter. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and turn this to on, and you'll see it jumps up to 12.4, okay? Now let's see what happens. All right, so what you guys will notice is that the battery, when I went to start it, it really didn't want to try there for a second. And then once the motor got turned over, it got a little bit of momentum, okay? Sometimes when you have a dead battery, it'll go vroom, 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 okay? It's got to get the momentum behind it, okay? Also, once the car started, did you notice the numbers on that jump pack? They jumped, right? They got up to the high 13s. That tells me that the alternator's doing its job and it's actually recharging that battery, okay? So, now we're gonna move on. All right, guys, so let's talk about batteries here real quick, okay? We have literally thousands of options on batteries these days, okay? If you are in the process of changing your own battery, I highly encourage you to do it. It takes very basic tools to do. Often just one bolt to remove, and then you've got your holder out, and then you can change out your battery. They are quite heavy, so be careful. But let's talk about the actual batteries themselves real quick, okay? There are a couple of considerations you need to take before you actually purchase a battery. Mainly, am I going to be driving this vehicle every day? What size battery did it come with in the first place? And what kind of climate do I live in? For us here in Tennessee, we don't live in a cold climate, obviously, okay? We do during the winter get some colder temperatures, and for that you're going to need a little bit stronger battery. Batteries are rated on a couple of different things, but the one that's talked about the absolute most is something called CC amps, cold cranking amps. And let's actually zoom in here and let's talk about what that means, okay? So for this car, we have a 5-cylinder engine, okay? So 5-cylinder is gonna need a little bit more power to get started than a 4-cylinder. So if I'm looking down here at my battery, okay, I see all these different numbers, okay? So first one I see, this big large one, is cranking amps, okay? Above 32 degrees, this battery has 1,000 cranking amps. Below 32 degrees and really down to zero, at zero, it is rated at 850. That's quite a bit of drop. So if I have a vehicle that needs at least 550 cranking amps in order to start, okay, I might buy a battery that says 500 cranking amps, but might only have cold cranking amps of 375. And that's important to know, okay? Another thing to know is amp hours, okay? This is 80 amp hours, and it has a reserve capacity of 140. So this is quite a large battery. All that means to you guys is that when we go through and over the life of this battery, if I accidentally leave my headlights on occasionally or anything like that, it's gonna be okay for the most part. It's also gonna be harder to charge, okay? It's gonna take more energy to fill this battery up than it would, say, my Camry battery over there, because it's a lot smaller engine. It's a 4-cylinder. Some cars, believe it or not, have batteries that are extremely small. They almost look like lawnmower batteries. I had a Miata that you could hold in your hand like this, okay? Something like that, if I leave the headlights on for, you know, even a couple hours, it's gonna drain it very, very quickly. I think that's all we need to talk to you guys today about batteries. If you have questions, please feel free to comment below, and we will try and answer those as much as we can. And yeah, good luck to you guys, and I hope this has been helpful.